we are going to go straight into calls because we're actually stacking up a bunch.
They're coming in.
So I'm going to go to Davis in Colorado, who says that he does not have enough faith to be an atheist. I feel like I've heard this before. How's it going, Davis?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Hey, Davis. Good to talk with you. Thanks for calling in. How can we help you today?
So I was actually just calling because I had a couple questions about the atheist worldview. So I know that as atheists, you guys reject the idea of God, right? So I was wanting to clarify, like, what do you mean by God? What's your definition of God?
Yeah, so we're already kind of in a weird territory because atheism is, the way I look at it, atheism is just a grunt, and you could mean a lot of different things by that. And what most people mean is not accepting the God hypothesis, or that the proposition is true that God exists. Some just rejecting it and actually saying it's false. So I can't speak for Dave. For me, I do think a lot of positions, or at least a lot of properties that will be attributed to God, will entail some contradiction. So it's actually kind of that I need to know what it is the person means when they give the God claim, because it's just a grunt, right? It's just three letters. So I need to actually unpack what somebody means. Otherwise, I don't even know what it is that I'm rejecting.
Sure.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That's that. I would add on to that. My view is similar to what Mike said, in that atheist is a response to the God claim. Atheist. So if you're making a claim that you have a particular theistic God that you're presenting, then my response to that is, I don't see enough evidence to accept that claim, and therefore I'm going to say I'm an atheist, an atheist. I don't. And so when you say you don't have enough faith to be an atheist, if you want to expand on that, that'd be interesting, because to me that doesn't require any faith in anything. I'm not making a claim that I have to back up with any kind of faith. So to Mike's point, how would you respond to the question of what kind of God are you presenting?
Yeah. Well, I guess where I'm kind of coming from is I feel like nobody can really fully prove that there is or isn't a God. But it's tricky because the idea of God itself is something that I don't think a human can really grasp. But when I ask about, like, what you define God as, I'm curious what that is, because in order to reject something, you probably have to have an idea of what the thing is that you're rejecting. So just to give you my definition of God, like, what I would describe is an immaterial, infinite, eternal being that has morality and has a sense of good and evil, and basically is the source of everything that we see, everything that physically exists in this physical universe. And I don't see how anything could exist without the idea of a higher power to speak it into existence. And so that's where I get a little confused on how anything could exist without sort of source.
Can I point something out though real quick? Sorry, it's just because there's a couple things I want to make sure I keep on track. But if I start backwards, what you cited just seemed like personal incredulity to me, because I don't want to like pin that on you fully, but when you said I just can't see the world working like without a God, that's just saying Y must be true because I can't imagine X being true, right? But that's not like really an argument. That's just incredulity.
Okay, well that's a fair point to say. So then I guess I would be curious, like, how even if let's just say that I can't imagine why God exists, but or why anything could exist without God. Well, okay, so let's say that I could imagine how something could exist sorry, that doesn't make sense. So I'm gonna back up. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around the idea that everything could come from nothing. Like, everything that we see in the universe just came out of nothing.
That's not an atheist position, right? So like someone like Graham Oppy, who is a philosopher, he has a position. It's like there's a necessary initial item, right? Natural item. There's no state of nothingness prior to that. There's nothing like something didn't come out of anything because there's no state of nothing for it to come out of. That's actually a position that if you're a Christian, like someone like William Lane Craig holds to, right? They think God created, it's just God. We'll kind of use your definition, right? God's existing alone, right? It's just a mind alone. And I think we both agree on what kind of makes a God in this case, which is creating the external world, creating everything. But if it's the case that he creates the external world, but prior to that, it's just him, what does he create the world out of? Right? Nothing. Right? He literally creates the world from nothing. So that would actually be the theist position. It wouldn't be like that. The atheist, something doesn't come from nothing. It's kind of like a meme. It's like not really. I mean, some atheists might hold to that, but that's not a position. I don't think I've met an atheist that holds that position.
No, I haven't either. It's kind of a straw man that we keep having to knock down because people keep putting it up there. It's not a thing that we adhere to. We don't have an atheist doctrine that's the first point of. So I want to go back, Davis, if you will, to you put out this hypothesis of a God with these attributes, but you preface that by saying we can't prove or disprove the existence of such a God. And I agree with that. So when you're making a claim that this God exists, and you're kind of basing it on the idea that you can't imagine the world without a God like this, that's a pretty strong claim. So how do you back that up is my question to you.
Mm-hmm. I guess the question I'm trying to answer is, what's the best explanation of reality? Like how does anything exist if there's nothing, if there's no source, if there's nothing that it can emerge from, if there's nothing that can, like something can't come from nothing at the end of the day. Like we can't.
Yeah, but we've already kind of squashed that.
You keep going back to that, and again, that's not a thing that we're saying. Science continues to give us understanding about our origins and about how things developed and how things came to be. What religion has done throughout the centuries and continues to do now is to put forth an answer for that and hold to that answer, even in the face of scientific discoveries proving it otherwise. So I'm not in the position of saying, this is the answer, and I'm not going to listen to anything that doesn't comport with this answer. And that's what religion has historically done. And they're starting, I used to be a Christian, I don't know if you know that, but I used to believe that the words of the Bible were true. And so I held the position that the creation story was real and accurate, and that the things in the Bible were true. And when something came along in science or in history or in geography or physics that contradicted what the Bible told me, I had a problem. Which was I going to believe? And so we're not holding a position that we have to defend. We're saying if there's things about the universe that are not understood yet, I'm perfectly fine saying, I don't know. I don't know how.
Yeah, I think majority of things we would just concede we don't know, and a lot that's perfectly fine.
But the Christians I know of have a hard time saying that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, I mean, the thing that I want to hone in on, Dave, is you do accept the claim, and Dave is absolutely right. You've kind of put it in conjunction with this. I can't imagine it the other way, right? X must be true. Not X seems just wholly impossible or improbable. Now, I'm curious, what is like the method or mechanism that you use to get there, right? Because if you feel like that position is justified, presumably you have reasons to give that serve as the justifiers. And so I'm curious, what is it like? What was that process for you to go, must be X, not X, no way, right? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, and for me, it's tricky because you can't really, on either side, I think like you pointed out, you can't really say this is the truth or this is not the truth. You can't, because nobody can prove that God is or isn't real, like you just mentioned. And I feel like that kind of puts you guys almost more in the agnostic camp instead of atheism, because the position of agnosticism is we can't know for sure. And where the atheist,
because I'm atheist towards majority of God concepts that have been put forth to me. So like when I actually analyze and I look at my credence towards what I would affirm as the proposition, my credence leans heavily towards that there wouldn't be a designer or a creator or any of that. That's where it leans, and for good reason, because when people offer these types of analyses, they generally are riddled with some type of like logical contradiction that you can easily spell out. Or we can just do like a worldview comparison. And I just by pure parsimony, I don't have to add this foreign supernatural mind on top of things, because I can explain the data without it. And so to me, it's a really good indicator that if I can explain all the data without invoking these intentional states, right? These like beliefs God desired for the world to be this way and desired the trees to do that. Like if you just shave all that off, you have a complete world. You can develop a complete worldview that explains all the data. Right.
Okay.
That to me does lead me to say I'm an atheist. Right. I would lean more towards that proposition. Now, yes, I'm going to be agnostic in the sense that I can't like globally show all concepts. I have to listen to them first. But you hold a position to presumably a very specific God that you do believe in, right? And it doesn't seem like you're offering the mechanism that how you actually got there. It sounds like you want to deflect to like what we think for some reason.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, and for me, it wasn't like a quick, like, oh, this is exactly how I came to it. Like, I started from a high level of like questioning like these bigger things. And then I started to narrow it down to like, see, okay, well, which God makes more sense to me. But like, I noticed that you mentioned about you went based off of the data to kind of draw a conclusion about, okay, that there can't be a God because this is the data that says there isn't one.
I'm saying at no point do you have to invoke desires or a mind or anything like that to explain how the world works around us. Mm-hmm. Nowhere does adding that into the hypothesis like create some new thing that we don't know, right? That's what I take to be evidence. Some type of predictive expectation, something we don't currently know, and we confirm it and it comes true. And at no point when we add this idea of desires or intentions behind it, has it ever been viable in the hypothesis. It's never even needed. You can just shave it off. Now I can say, well, I didn't rule it out, but I can make a pretty damn good case that under it, I don't have to add unicorns to my hypotheses. I don't have to add spirits and souls to them. And so I can just discount them out of hand because the way that I want to look at the world around me is what makes predictive expectation. The God hypothesis doesn't seem to make any predictive expectation from my view. So I don't see why it's useful.
A universe that doesn't have a God in it. So if there's a universe that doesn't have a creator, like for instance, do you guys believe in the Big Bang?
Yes.
As I understand it, yeah.
But before we get there, we didn't really get to, because we have to make the call somewhat short so I can get to other callers. But I would love to answer what you're saying, but you didn't really give me, when I asked you the question directly, what was the mechanism or method that you used to get to this conclusion where you think it's like unlikely that something like naturalism could be true?
Well, I started asking myself what could cause the Big Bang, because it can't just come from nothing. And that's the question that even scientists don't know the answer to. They'll just say, well, we don't actually know, but it's okay because that doesn't apply. This is the one thing that we don't need evidence for. We're just going to say it doesn't have a cause, and everything.
Yeah, but you're kind of misunderstanding. You're kind of misunderstanding the fact that we can always shove something behind the curtain, right? We can say that there's something precedes that, or there was some initial state that always existed, but you're doing something else. You're saying that thing behind the curtain has to have intentional states and desires, right? And wants and wills and needs, right? Things that are hallmarks for agency. Like that's the God claim. That's what that whole thing is. It's not just simply there needs to be something prior to it, because that's a really easy move for a theist to do. It's really easy for them to go, hey, there's this thing we can't explain. There's something prior. Okay, great. Why couldn't naturalism plant their flag there too? I don't get it.
I guess the question I want to ask you, Davis, is where Mike addressed earlier. You've gone from there must be something that created this to believing in a specific God. And I'm guessing, is it the God of the Bible, the Christian God, or some other?
Well, yeah, I would identify as a Christian, I would say, but okay. I didn't get there.
So how did you get from there must be something that created the universe because something can't come from nothing to the God of the Bible, the Christian God? How did you get there? That's the question Mike's been asking you that you kind of keep dodging. So how did you get there?
And what I'm saying is, I can't even get to that point until I've established there's a possibility of a creator. If I haven't even
No. It doesn't matter that you established that there could be this. You've said there could be this. It must be this, and so therefore your conclusion is it's the God of the Bible. Tell us why. What's your evidence? Tell us how you got there.
Okay. I looked at the world and I see that there's the existence of morality. Everybody has a sense of meaning. I think humans aren't animals. I think we have a greater sense of identity. We're searching for meaning. We have love. We have attributes that animals just don't have. Animals.
It's weird. It's
suicide.
weird though. I'm not hearing even Jesus's name being mentioned, because that's hard for me to like really believe you became a Christian from all these things that any theist could just look to for a generic God, right? It seems strange that like Jesus has like, is Jesus not a big factor in you being a Christian?
Well, he's the biggest part of it, but I didn't get there.
Sure, then why wouldn't that be the reason that you offer, right?
All the religions of the world.
I would love to finish. I would love to finish.
Sure, go ahead. Sure, go ahead. I'm just confused by this response that Christians give, where Jesus is never the thing. It's like, here's this modal ontological argument or kalam cosmo. It's never like the thing that actually convinces them. It's weird to me. It's just so strange.
So
okay, go ahead and finish your statement, Davis. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so with all these different things, humans have identity. We have all these like questions about like just the meaning of life and everything. And I feel like Jesus, aside from just the historicity of his existence, it seems to be the figure that is the best solution to the human condition. Like we're in this broken state. We're in this broken, world where everything, we all know something's off. Like everybody wants meaning, everybody wants to be loved, everybody wants to be like have some sort of purpose. Like what are we doing here? And I feel like that's where the figure of Christ comes into the picture, and he's able to take those burdens off of us. And I feel like the world has this very skewed view of Jesus, where he's just some authority that comes in and says, you have to do this, this, and this, and if you don't do that, then I'm going to send you to hell forever. And that's such a like
he did say those things.
It's missing part of the picture, because part of why I think Jesus is the answer is because he has the answers to everything else in life, like all this stuff, all this like.
Why? Because a book says something, or because you independently confirm that, or is it just the book says something?
It's a mix of. Again, this kind of stems. It goes back to the original question of, okay, what's the point of all this? And then I look at the human condition. I say, okay, we're broken. So what's wrong with this? There's something wrong with this picture. Why are people all searching for happiness, but nobody can find it in a way that truly fills us up? There's this hole in our hearts that nobody can really seem to fill. And that's where, once I like accepted,
my heart pumps blood. I don't know what you mean.
I found that hole was filled.
Davis, that hypothesis has all kinds of holes in it. First of all, the vast majority of criminals in prison today claim to be a Christian. Do you know that?
Okay.
Are you aware of that?
Just because somebody says they're a Christian, I would say that doesn't make them a true like.
Oh, so you get to decide who's a true Christian or not, because the point is, many people have claimed. Listen, many people have claimed that Jesus saved them, Jesus helps them, and yet we see no evidence of that. We see no evidence of anybody who. There's no higher morality in the Christian world than there is in the secular world. You have to be aware of that. So surely you're aware of that.
The world get morality. I'm curious, where does the secular world get morality from?
That's really easy. There's positions. So for me, at least, I'm not a moral realist, so this isn't my position. But there are people that are called moral naturalists or moral realists, and they don't believe in God, and they at least give arguments or reasons why it's the case. So there is an analysis for that position. So there is, and what they're going to be called is they're going to be what's called stance independent reasons. So like reasons independent of your attitudes and values for why you should do some action. And there's people that believe that those exist, right? You should not go harm somebody unnecessarily or an innocent person, right? There's the things that they think that these are facts in the world. Now, whether that thesis is successful is another thing. But the view you're coming from by saying morality is a subjective view. It's just what God commands. If in the view that in 1 Samuel 15:3, when God commands Amalekites infants to be slaughtered, right? That it would be good under your view. That would be a good thing. So long as it's commanded by the thing. That's not morality at all. It's obedience. There's nothing there about what someone should or should not do. The moral facts can just change on a whim. So I don't know this. I don't understand this high ground of morality from theists when theirs is so vacuous and devoid of anything intrinsic to the actual actions. It's actually an extrinsic thing. What makes like throwing someone off a building wrong is if God puts this extrinsic notion that it's wrong, this command, not that the intrinsic action had anything to do with it, right? It's just so divorced from how we actually deal with ethics. So I don't get this move of putting the theist at this high moral ground. I don't get it. I think that the person who I disagree with, the moral naturalist, who's an atheist, who's trying to argue, they're arguing and actually looking at the actions. They're actually caring, right? They're actually making a thesis that's worth approaching. So I don't get that move.
It's a really bad argument to say that morality came from the God of the Bible. Any cursory reading of the Bible will dispel that notion quickly. Morality evolved through society as people learned how to deal with each other in the ways that would best serve the society they lived in. It's pretty simple. The God of the Bible did not bring us morality in any sense of the word, just like Mike went through that with you.
Okay.
So that's a really hollow argument.
So you guys said a lot there, and I think those are all really good points. I'd love to go through a couple of them, but I guess I know this is a limited time frame, but I'm curious, like, do you believe in evil?
Well, I believe that I think
depends on how you define evil, because if you're looking at good versus evil,
things that should not be done.
You put it forth, so you tell me the definition.
Well, I would just say, well, here I have my computer in front of me. I'm just going to look up the definition of evil on Google.
Well, let's focus on this. Do we agree? This will be much easier. This will just be
evil.
But yeah, but this is just going to convolute things. This will be much easier because we can just both agree on this from both of our worldviews. Do you agree good is something of what should be done, ought be done, like coming to God in your worldview or accepting Jesus with all your heart? You believe that's something I ought do, right?
Well, I wouldn't say you have to. I would say that's your choice, but I would
say
that
God is the standard, and if I want to be in accord with God, it's something I ought do, right?
I mean, that's if you define God as the ultimate standard of good.
I'm asking from your worldview.
Why can't you just answer the question?
Yeah, it seems obviously your worldview.
The reason that I would say yes is because for me,
I don't need the reason yet. I don't need the reason yet. I just want to go through this real quick. I don't need the reason. It's going to convolute things. We can get to the reason. If you think that good is what ought be done or should be done, evil is what ought not be done, like sinning. We agree sin's something we should not do.
I mean, yes, because sin is damaging.
Cool, right? You can give me any reason. It's fine. I'll grant the reason. So we have on the table an analysis of something that should be done that's consistent with the standard, something that should not be done, evil and good, bad and good, right? Now, your God, he can't fail, right? He's infallible. No matter what his intentions are, he's going to succeed, right?
He will succeed at his will. It doesn't mean it's our will, but okay.
Sure. Now, does God will for evil in the world?
That's a really good question. Evil has to exist in order for anything outside of God to exist, because God is the only
I'm just asking if he does. Does he will it or not?
He doesn't want it to, but it's a requirement in order for good to exist. You can't have one without the other.
So does he when he look, this is really easy. When he creates the world and he's going to actualize the world that he wants to create, when he makes the intention of the world, does he intend for evil to be in it or not? If he doesn't, it's going to be successful, right?
That's not an answer. That's not an answer that we can understand in this lifetime. But I believe that the cost of creating, if from the theistic perspective, if God's going to bring anything into existence and create humans and give them consciousness in order to experience His goodness and His grace, then they're going to have an option. They're going to have an option to choose Him or to turn and fulfill their own desires and fulfill their own.
Great. So perfect. So now under your view, it sounds like you're saying it's required. God intends it. Do you think He could create a world where we're all like Him? We just freely do good?
So there's a difference between something being required and something being intended. He had to create the universe in order to have His glory reflected back at Him, because He is the ultimate source of good.
Okay, so it's just really easy. All you're saying is there's reasons that God has to allow evil, right? And so all we can just point out is that I don't even know how you construe that it's a bad thing. If you take, like, this example has been given by some people I know that I think is a really good example. If you take your daughter to get a vaccine, right, you wouldn't say pricking the child is like a bad thing. You would say it's something you ought to. All things considered, we ought prick the child because they're not going to get polio or COVID, right? And so if that's the case, we wouldn't say that that's a bad thing we shouldn't do. And your view wouldn't be any different. Your view would be, well, God thinks that we need these things, right? He could probably create the world without the evil or the injustice or Holocaust or things like that. But rather, he thinks those things are required, right, for significance of humans. That's like a horrible view from my
free will
perspective.
that's required. It's not evil that's required. It's free will that's required.
Is
No,
God
it's
okay?
not.
This is
No,
is
it's
God
not.
good? Is God
Free
all
will
good?
is not required, Davis. You think it is
Right,
because in
so
your
if I-
view that's how God did it, but free will is not required.
And it doesn't make
Okay,
sense.
so
If
let's
you think
just
God is all good, Davis, when we have to move on with this,
Yeah, we
this
do. We
response
need to move
really
on.
doesn't make sense to me, because if you think God is all good, right? He can only do good. He only does what should be done. And you think he's free, right? He's not robotic, like creating the world. He's free. Then there's no issue on your view. You already believe in a foundational being that's free, that does only good. And he could create those exact same types of beings. But instead, he has reasons to create a different world, right? He intends for there to be evil in the world. It seems to just be straightforward to me. But all right, we have to move on to other callers. I'd think about that, though.
And it doesn't require
I
any
just have
faith
one
to be an
question. Can I
atheist.
ask one question before?
No, we really need to move on. We've spent more than enough time on this call. We've got a lot of calls.
Yeah, call back next week. Part of that could be my fault, so I apologize. But when people throw the morality thing on there, it kind of irritates me, because one, you don't have this high horse. It's just your view turns out to be really uncomfortable really quick. And then two, if God just creates evil and that's required, then all things considered, it's a good thing, right? It's not an evil thing. It's a good thing under your view. It's foundationally required for his plan to come into fruition. So it just like blows my mind.